everybody. How's it going? This is John from the Record Shelf. The Doors, L.A. Woman. That's the album we're going to be doing today, starting today, doing the first 3 songs off it. It came out in 1971, and it was the last album featuring the Doors with Jim Morrison. Now, there was something else done in 1978, but of course, Jim Morrison had died by then. In fact, this album was put out 3 months before Jim Morrison's death in Paris. It's a very interesting story about the Doors, and Jim Morrison is the character that it all kind of revolves around because he was a very unusual, enigmatic person with a very difficult psyche and hard to understand. He wrote really brilliant lyrics and was a great vocalist, great singer, but he had a lot of weight on him. He had a lot of problems, and interestingly, his family didn't know he had all these problems. His father was an admiral in the U.S. Navy, his sister. Nobody seemed to realize who this young man actually was. And the problems of fame that came down upon him. And by this time this album was released, Jim Morrison was actually someone who didn't want to be Jim Morrison anymore. He didn't want the image of this svelte, young, good-looking singer, sex symbol. He wanted to be an artist. He wanted to be known for the things he was trying to say and communicate and his singing. And I think the weight of this problem finally fell on him so much that he actually did himself in. And his suicide, or his death, and I believe it was a suicide, surprised everybody. Surprised his father and his sister. People that knew him just didn't think that's who he was. This is not uncommon. People send out signs of mental illness or just being unbalanced or whatever, and people just don't look. They want to excuse it, cover it up, say it's something else. And the people in the band, though, they knew that something was going on with their singer. But you know, what can you do? You know, the band's job is not to be a psychiatrist. They were a band, and they were putting out their next album, which had some great music on it. And it's interesting to note that, in fact, this album, while it's been well known and did so well, it was actually dismissed by their producer, who actually quit during the session, saying the whole thing was he called it cocktail music. And he just didn't think it was all that good. He said the material was bad, the attitude was bad, the performance was bad. Basically, he didn't think that, he says after 3 days of listening, he said, that's it, can't be a part of it, don't want to do it. So anyway, he just said, look, I think all this stuff sucks. That was a quote from the producer. I don't think the world wants to hear it. It's the first time I've ever been bored in a recording studio in my life. I want to go to sleep. And so after saying that, he was called the fifth door because of his involvement in their career. He just walked out. And once the shock wore off of the band that their producer just said this and walked out on him, they turned to engineer Bruce Botnick, whose credits included all of their previous albums, as well as the Beach Boys album Pet Sounds and the Rolling Stones album Let It Bleed. Now, with this guy's help, they reinvigorated the band, and they vowed to co-produce their new album. And gone were the days of the original producer's studio strictness, where it was normal to record 30 takes or spend hours on perfecting a drum sound. So the previous producer, Rothschild, was gone. And it's one reason why they said they had so much fun recording this album for the first time. Robbie Krieger said the warden was gone. Now, when they recorded this, Jim Morrison recorded his vocal parts in the bathroom. They didn't want the high-tech situation at Sunset Sound. They decided to record it in their workshop on Santa Monica Boulevard, and it was the room they had rehearsed in forever. It had been their rehearsal room, so they recorded everything in this place. It was tight. It was comfortable, but it was tight. There was a lot of stuff laying around, and Jim recorded his vocal parts in the bathroom like that was the sound booth. Interestingly, when I was in bands, we recorded a couple of demo tapes in our practice room, and it was comfortable. It felt like home, and we always felt very relaxed and fun doing it, rather than going into a studio where you're on the clock and you're not comfortable with it. It seems very rigid, and sometimes you don't play as well when you're not relaxed. And so they put out a fantastic album, and I think a lot of it was because they did it in their home studio. and they just felt like they were just having fun as a band. And when you're having fun, you do better than when you're not having fun. Now, the band consists of Raymond Zarek, who was the keyboard player, Robbie Krieger, the guitar player, and of course we had the Jim Morrison, the singer, and John Densmore, the drummer. And all these guys were actually just brilliant musicians, great musicians. And the Doors were really known for being a rock band, even though they were classified as a rock band. I really think that their influences are so varied and so vast that it's almost like jazz pop. Some stuff could be considered rock, but you know what? They had such great other influences outside of that, and they brought those influences in, that it was hard to just label the Doors as a rock album. And I know they are in that category, and because they were coming out during the time that rock and roll was very big, especially in the early 1970s, and so they were classified as a rock band. But I'm not convinced that they're just a rock band. A lot of their music is just great music, and I wouldn't always say this is rock. You could put it on a easy listening station. You could put it on a sort of a jazz pop station. Their music can be spread around to a lot of categories. And as I said, in the 70s, this was not unusual. Bands used a variety of influences and tastes and eras and brought this stuff in to the 1970s and put it in their music. A lot of bands did this, folks. Lots of bands. Queen did this, The Doors, and I just can go on and on. There's so many bands that put a variety of sounds and stuff into their music, into what's called rock music. Led Zeppelin did it. Kansas did it. Other bands as well. I can go on and on and on. But so this was something that was common in the 1970s. And the Doors, one of the first ones to do this. And they were just really not a rock band in the literal sense. But since they were a amazing, massive act in the rock and roll period, the ascendancy of rock and roll in the world, in the West, in the United States, they're classified as rock, so we're including them as a rock band for this review. Now, I'm going to be clear. I haven't heard this album in a very long time, so there's going to be some stuff that I'm actually going to react to rather than just review. There's a few songs that I know really well, and there's some songs I don't know really well. So you're going to get the reaction of a 62-year-old musician, and that's what I am. I've been playing drums 50 years and been in a lot of bands, studio, stage, played, with little bands, big bands, etc. So I'm aware of the whole musical landscape of the time, and I have experience with instruments and knowing how the albums are put together and how music is put together and how you write music and play music, and I know the drum parts. But I'm also going to approach it as a listener, a first-time listener, because some of the stuff it's going to be on here I haven't heard in ages and ages and ages. So you're going to get a reaction from someone, and I don't do a lot of reactions because I've heard most everything. So this is going to be good. I'm looking forward to this. So we are going to start out with the first song is the Changeling. Okay, what about this Changeling? Well, the Changeling in mythology is a creature who can be substituted for a human baby. And they're often unpredictable. They can become outcasts. And that's really how Jim Morrison frames himself in the song. You never know where he'll show up next. He's not even sure who he is anymore. Now, Raymond Zarek, the keyboardist, and John Densmore commented on this song back in 2012. And Ray said that the song really tells the story of Morrison's adventurous life in Los Angeles. And he said that from the time they met to the time he died, Morrison changed from what he called Michelangelo's statue of David to overweight with a beard. Now, to be fair to Jim, the fashion of men in the early 1970s was changing to long hair with a beard. And that was a lot of musicians at the time were growing beards and had long hair. So to be fair to Jim, it wasn't necessarily something that was out of place. Now, if he'd shaved his head and put bones through his nose and had tattoos everywhere, that would be different. But for that period of time, that was actually kind of normal. In fact, in the early 70s, that was normal. Now, Jim may have gotten this idea for this song from a student film that he saw at USC, and it was called The Changeling. And so, anyway, he obviously got his ideas from a number of sources, but I believe it was probably from this film that he saw. And he wrote the lyrics in 1968 for this song, but the Doors didn't record obviously until this album came out, which was his last album. And it was the first song on the L.A. Woman, and they wanted it to be the single for the album. But the Elektra record says, no, we want the next song, the very next song, which is Love Her Madly as the single. And that's how this turned out. So let's go ahead and listen to The Changeling from the Doors, 1970. And here we go. Pausing it right here. I really dig that keyboard, growling keyboard coming in. If I haven't said so before in other reactions, I love the keyboard of the late 60s, early 70s. I love the Hammond organ sound. I've heard it used to great effect by bands like Deep Purple and, of course, The Doors. And it's just really good. This is a great, this has a sound of an early, if I listened to the song, my eyes closed, didn't know anything about The Doors, didn't know anything about their music. And if I listened to this, I could tell you it came out in the early 70s, just by the way, the meter of the music, the way the groove they're putting into it clearly is a early 1970s groove, and the whole thing is just feels like that period. And I can say that because I've listened to a lot of music over my life, and I was probably, well, in 1970 I was 9 years old, but I was just getting into popular music in that time, just starting to listen to the radio and understanding what I was listening to. So stuff like this was still a little out of my reach. Now, when I got older, I heard Doors music, and I was like, wow, this is good. I like it. When I got in my 20s, I really got into the Doors a lot. And this was in the 80s now, so it took me almost a decade to really become a Doors fan. But even in high school, I heard their music, or when I was in junior high on the radio, and I liked it. But anyway, I love the keyboard on this. Really is great keyboard playing. John Densmore's drumming is just terrific. Just fantastic. Okay, let's continue. Here we go right now. Very good. Wow. Outstanding. That's a great song. Really, I love Jim's voice in this. It's kind of raw. Yeah. I like that one. That one I haven't heard in a very long time, but it's got a great groove to it, and yeah, I love that Hammond, that organ sound again, that growling organ, the way Ray plays it, and Robbie's wah-wah guitar sound. So reminiscent of the early 70s, because I remember when I had my first little kiddie band we were in, it had to be about 73. I was just learning to play drum set, and some kid came over with a guitar, and he had a wah pedal and a little practice amp, and he's just going wow, wow, wow. He thought it was the coolest thing, and we did too, but that was and a fuzz sound too. So fuzz box, wah pedal, okay. Big, one of the first sound effects of guitar players in that period. All right, great song. It's got a great groove to it. It's a great way to start an album, I think, to kick in with that groove. So it's kind of upbeat, and it's the kind of song that an album from that period really should start out with. It's just great kickoff. And I disagree with the producer at the time, Rothschild. This is not garbage. This is not childish music. This is good stuff. And I think this is probably I believe, one of their best albums. And as the reason I'm reviewing it is I think it's one of the great albums of the 1970s. And I think it's very clearly a 70s album, not a 60s album. There's elements in this that sound like the beginning of a new era of rock, which is what 1970s kind of was. And so I think it does fit. It's a great way to introduce the decade, to kick the decade off, because it has a sound that really is distinct from the 1960s in some way, in many ways. So this would be one of the first, like, Deep Purple's albums and some Zeppelin's early albums. They really do begin to define and frame and establish a sound for 1970s rock and pop music. And I think this album does that nicely. Okay, the next song is one that if you've listened to the radio in the last 50 years, you've heard this song. It's called Love Her Madly. And it came out in this album, 1971. It was the first single from this album. It wasn't the one the band wanted, but the Elektra Records says, yeah, this is the one you're doing. And it's really about, it was written by Robbie Krieger, the guitar player, about his tumultuous relationship with his wife. And it's one of the highest rated singles of the Doors in their entire career. It reached number 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. And there's not much to say about the meaning of the song, except Krieger's writing style was very literal rather than figurative or symbolic. Krieger tended to be a very literal writer, and so this kind of, you could hear it in the song. There's not much more to say, but let Robbie speak for himself. So we're going to listen to Love Her Madly from the Doors, 1971 album L.A. Woman. Here we go right now.
Don't you love her madly? Don't you need her badly? Don't you love her ways? Tell me what you say. Don't you love her madly? Wanna be her daddy? Don't you love her face? Don't you love her as she's walking out the door? Like she did 1,000 times before. Don't you love her ways? Tell me what you say. Don't you love her as she's walking out the door? All your love, all your love, all your love. All your love is gone. So sing a lonely song of a deep blue dream. 7 horses seem to be on the mark. Yeah, don't you love her? Don't you love her as she's walking out the door? All your love, all your love, all your love. Yeah, all your love is gone. So sing a lonely song of a deep blue dream. 7 horses seem to be on the mark. Don't you love her madly? Don't you love her madly? Don't you love her madly?
Wow, awesome song. I love that song. I've always loved that song. When I first heard it on the radio when I was a kid, I was like, man, that's a great song. And I didn't understand the lyrics too much. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. But it's just a great song. I mean, it's upbeat, it's happy, it just makes you feel good. It's a feel-good song, and yet it's really not a feel-good song. It's about this guy's wife walking out the door, leaving him, and she probably did it 100 times before. So she was obviously someone who had control issues and lots of problems, and she threatened leaving, but she'd always come back. And he's obviously, Robbie's telling us that, every time she leaves out, he's crazy about her, he's absolutely crazy about her. Even though this woman is obviously maybe not, rowing with less than one oar, he's crazy about her. And, that can happen to a guy. He's crazy, or a gal. You love this person, you're crazy about them so much, even though they're doing stuff that's just, bonkers. You can't help yourself. You're crazy about him. So Robbie was obviously crazy about his wife, and I love that that keyboard. It has that sort of saloon piano. It's just a really great sound for the piano and the keyboard in that song. To me, that's what really does it. I love the guitar. The drums are great. The vocals are awesome. But Ray's keyboard playing for that chorus is just, to me, is just incredible. I love the sound of that keyboard. Great song. One of the top songs of the Doors catalog that so many people like, and this is definitely at the top of the list of a lot of them. So, all right. So that was "Love Her Madly," a number one single, huge hit on the radio. You'll still hear it today on classic radio stations. And if you haven't done it, check out the movie. If you're new to this stuff, called The Doors, and Val Kilmer plays Morrison, and it's really a great movie. I wish it was more about the band, more about Ray and Robbie and John, because these guys, I got to tell you, as good as Jim was, this band they were great musicians, brilliant musicians, great songwriters, just fabulously talented. And Robbie and John are still around. They're still playing today. I've seen them get up and do a one-off or play with, I think there's a video on YouTube of them singing one of their songs with the drummer from the Foo Fighters who just recently died. Taylor, I believe was his name, Taylor Hawkins. And he's trying to sing Morrison's part. Doesn't quite get it, but that's not the point. Anyway, they're playing drums and guitar, and it's just great. It's great to see them out there playing. And John Densmore is still very much, alive. He's like a 80-year-old teenager, okay? So anyway, it's really cool to see these guys are still playing, love their music, and, not gone into retirement home or old folks home, even though they're quite up there in years. So love this album, but I wanted to get back to my original thought that, as good as Morrison was, and he was a great lyricist, poet, and singer, you got, that movie about the Doors should have been about the whole band, because these guys were a band. It wasn't just like, even though Morrison was the star, he would have been nothing without these guys behind him, okay? These guys behind him were the Doors, okay? Jim should have been called Jim Morrison and the Doors, because I've heard other people sing with these guys since Jim died, and the music is still just as good. Okay, it isn't the same without Jim's voice, but the music is still just as good without them, and that just shows you how good these guys were. I love listening to them play their instruments. There's so many nuances and subtleties and details that they put in the music. And it's just great. It's great music. I just love it. And for me, it's kind of romantic, because I was pre-teen when the Doors were big and stuff. But I saw them on TV. I heard the music on the radio, and I remember being a child, an older child. My dad taught college, and sometimes the students would come over, and that whole 60s look, they had the long hair and the funny clothes and everything. And it just reminds me of this period, this whole period of American history when I was young. And sometimes you pine for it. It's like, things were simpler back then. They were a little weird sometimes, and there were problems in the world. It wasn't like we didn't have problems in the world, but there was something special about some of that. And this music brings that back to me, even though I was still pretty young. It's still, now that I know more about that period as I got older, I understand more or less what I was seeing and why I was seeing it and hearing it. But so I got sort of a sentimentality about some of this music. Okay, so the next song on the album is "Been Down So Long," and the title of the song was really inspired by a novel called "Been Down So Long It Looks Like Up to Me," and it's about a guy who. Well, the song was driven. The lyrics were really driven by the band's sense that they were constantly being harassed by authorities, and of course with Jim Morrison's various arrests, there was this constant drama going on with the band, and the novelist Richard Farina, who was good friends with Bob Dylan, was also a singer, and he married Joan Baez's younger sister and performed with her as Richard and Mimi Farina. So this is where this all kind of ties in. Well, Jim died shortly after this album's release, and he did some of his best work on it, but Jim struggled with alcoholism and drug abuse, and of course we know he died in Paris to everyone's surprise. And a lot of folks really thought he was still alive. He just faked his death. Maybe. I don't know. It's because it's possible. But I think he probably died. And the phrase in the song, "been down so long, and it looks like up to me," was, of course, used in another song from 1928 called "I Will Turn Your Money Green." Bob Dylan used a different lyric from that song in his 1997 track, "Trying to Get to Heaven." So apparently this material was used by other musicians as well, not just the Doors. But it reflects the situation going on with the Doors. They were very popular, and Jim Morrison was a character who had a lot of depth and difficulty and problems and the constant dealings with arrests and notoriety. This song kind of makes the band feel like, we're under the spotlight. We're dealing with a lot of problems in the band that most people don't even know about. So this song basically is about that. So let's listen to "Been Down So Long." And here we go right now.
Well, I've been down so goddamn long that it looks like up to me. Well, I've been down so very damn long that it looks like up to me. Yeah, why don't one you people come on and set me free? I said, "Warden, warden, warden, won't you break the lock and key?" I said, "Warden, warden, warden, won't you break your lock and key?" Yeah, come along here, mister. Come on, let the poor boy be.
like that. He dropped the tambourine at the end. Nice touch. Nice touch. That was a cool song. You know, that really had that sort of real down and out feeling. I mean, you could. I really heard the 1928, whatever it is. It sounds like it came from, you know, I would say African American music from the South or somewhere in the city back in the 20s or early part of the last century. It's got that feeling to it. Something that could have been written during the Great Depression, for example, about being a hobo or something. It has that feel to it. It has that vibe to it, really strong. And it's like some guys sitting there just beating on their instruments. I've been down so long, ain't nothing, you know, whatever. It's got that feel to it. They did a good job on this. But one thing I have to say is I really, really like Robbie's guitar on this. He was getting some great sounds out of that, really good sounds. And as I told you, these guys were great musicians. Just listen, you know, forget the lyrics and the singing. Just listen to the band, and it'll blow your socks off. These guys were so good. And I love Robbie's guitar playing. It's just so darn good here. Don't know what more to say about it. I'm not sure how I got that sound exactly, but really was great. Great. He picked the right notes. The noodling he was doing was really awesome. Really loved it. Not my favorite song on the album, but it has such a great feel to it. If you were really down and you couldn't get up in life, this could be your theme song because it makes you feel. This is how I feel. You can tell by the music. Okay, so we finished the first three songs on L.A. Woman from 1970, The Doors, their last album, with Jim Morrison singing, and 3 months before he passed away, a classic song of the 1970s, a classic record of the 1970s, a classic album of the 1970s, one of the greats and one of the great bands of rock and roll history. Can't say enough good things about The Doors, just great music to listen to. I don't know anybody that hates The Doors or doesn't like them. They just have such a great catalog of music, different styles. It's just, there's something you're going to like somewhere. And this album's got a lot of good stuff on it. Well, we're going to continue the rest of this album in another show, the next three songs. And so it's going to be some good stuff coming. So thank you for joining me on this exploration of the greatest albums of the 1970s and 80s, and The Doors, L.A. Woman from 1971, one of the best. And I'm glad you joined me on this magic carpet ride through this adventure. And please join me again. If you get a chance, check out our coffee. This is great coffee. We love coffee. My wife and I love coffee. My son we all love coffee. We're coffee fans. And we are putting this for sale so you guys can try some of this with us because this is really good stuff. The best coffee I've ever had. We have 5 flavors. We have 1 organic. We have lighter. We have heavier, stronger, lighter, whatever. Good stuff. And if you order your first order, there's free shipping on that first order using the code word coffee. So go to the link here, bradygourmet.myshopify.com. And pick up some bags of this coffee. I guarantee you, once you've had it, you'll want more. It's really that good. And you'll help support the channel. I need to get a new camera, other equipment as well. I want to put more into the show, improve the production values, and it'll really help us to do that. So thank you so much for joining me. Please join me again. Keep rocking on, and I'll see you again next time.